Check out pentheblogofficial. Like, share, follow and subscribe. This is the squirrel that stored nuts for winter. Once upon a time, deep in the woods, there lived a squirrel. The squirrel noticed that the other animals were preparing for winter, but he didn't do anything. He just continued to look for food each day. He was a very clever squirrel. Every day he would go out looking for food. He would find nuts, berries and seeds and take them back to his cozy dray. He wished he had listened to the owl and prepared for winter. If he had stored some nuts and berries, he wouldn't be hungry now. But it was too late. All he could do now was look for food. He thanked the little girl and ran off to find a new home. He had learned his lesson. If the squirrel had prepared for winter like the other animals, he wouldn't have had to suffer. But because he was too lazy to prepare, he had to go through a lot of hardship. So remember, friends, if you want to be like the squirrel at the end of the story, always be prepared. From then on, he always prepared for winter by storing nuts, seeds and berries. And every year he looked forward to the little girl's visit. She always brought him food and water, and he never had to worry about being hungry or thirsty again. As winter approached, the trees began to lose their leaves and the days grew shorter. One day, the squirrel came across an old, wise owl. Then we talked about how he suffered because he didn't prepare. If you like this story, please hit the like button. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Thank you for watching. And finally, we talked about how he learned his lesson and prepared for the next winter. What did you like best about the story? Tell me in the comments. The owl asked him, "Why aren't you preparing for winter like the other animals?" The squirrel replied, "I don't need to prepare. I can find food even in winter." The owl shook his head and said, "You may find food in winter, but it will be hard for you. If you had prepared like the other animals, your life would be much easier." The squirrel ignored the owl's advice and continued on. Days turned into weeks, and the first snow of winter arrived. The squirrel began to panic. He couldn't find any food and he was very hungry. He looked up at the other animals. They were snuggled up in their warm homes, and he envied them. He was so hungry that he started to eat snow. The squirrel looked down and saw a little girl. She was holding a plate of nuts and berries. "Here, little squirrel," she said, "eat these nuts and drink this water. You need to get strong so you can find food in the spring." The squirrel ate and drank, and it was the most delicious food he had ever tasted. He thought it would fill his stomach, but it only made him thirstier. The sun began to set and the temperature dropped. The squirrel shivered and curled up on a tree branch. He was very scared. It was the coldest night of the year, and he had no food or water. Just then, he remembered the old owl's advice. The squirrel searched and searched, but he couldn't find anything. Suddenly, he heard a voice. "Who's there?" When the sun came up the next morning, the squirrel was full of energy. Once again, our story reminds us that preparation prevents problems. Now let's make a summary of the story. First, we talked about how the squirrel didn't prepare for winter. Well, that's all for today.